Before we start building our gliders, let's review 7 rules for using X-Acto knives. The first rule is to only use the X-Acto knife when you have permission from your teacher. Your teacher needs to know that you're using it so they can make sure you're being safe. The second rule, which you can't see here, is to always wear safety goggles. X-Acto knives are very sharp and thin, and it's possible that small pieces can break off when you're using them. The third rule is to always use a cutting board when using an X-Acto knife. This prevents us from damaging the surface. Let's start to cut. Once you're ready, you're going to want to use a ruler to help guide your cutting. And this leads to rule number 4. Always keep your thumb and finger out of the way of the path you're cutting. Some people get tempted to leave their thumb there to hold the piece of wood down, but you might forget it's there and accidentally cut yourself. So your thumb and finger should be out of the way. The fifth rule is that you should always be cutting angled away from your body. You never want to be cutting towards your body in case you slip. Once we start cutting, we get to rule 6. Don't force it. Cutting with an X-Acto knife should feel like drawing with a pencil. Just make light cuts. Don't try to cut the wood in one go-around. Cut it multiple times over the same pathway. Eventually, after multiple cuts, the wood will come loose. At a certain point, you may simply be able to break off the piece of wood if it hasn't come off on its own, and your cut is complete. This brings us to our 7th and final rule. When you're done, always put the cap back on the X-Acto knife before you put it down. That way, in case you forget about it or a peer forgets about it, you won't accidentally get hurt. Now, once you have this all cut, there's one more minor issue before we can start gluing, and that is on the wing. As many of you noticed, your wings will have sometimes 1 or even 3 lines. And that's showing points where the wing needs to have a bend or an angle to it, because we don't want necessarily our wings to be perfectly flat. So in order to make that, we first need to sketch out where these lines are going to go. So I'm just going to hold the paper over. I'm going to mark with a pencil where these bends are supposed to go. Okay. And then what I'm going to do for each one is we're going to cut, but this time instead of cutting all the way through the wood, what we're going to try to do is cut just halfway through the wood. So again, I still have my goggles on. I'm still going to use all the same safety precautions. Take my ruler. Make sure it's straight. If you want, you can draw the whole line. And I'm going to very gently cut through. I don't want to cut all the way through. I'm just cutting through the first few layers of the wood. So I'm going to do that a few times. And I'm going to try bending it. Now when I try bending it, I'm just very carefully pulling it. I hear a little bit of movement, but I feel like if I push any further, it's just going to snap. So I'm going to go back and do a few more cuts. Lining up very carefully with the groove that I was cutting before. Again, not too hard. I'll try again. This time it's bending a little more. And now it has a very slight bend to it. There we go. So when you look at it from this angle, you can see it now has an angle to it. There's a little chipping there, but that's okay. So this way I don't have to cut it completely and re-glue it together. This is now ready, so when I glue it to my actual fuselage, that angle that I want is there, which will help control for roll. And I would do the same thing for these spots here.